Welcome to the Focal Insights Podcast Founder Hour edition, hosted by co-founder Joe Pawlak. Joe has been in the e-commerce industry for over 25 years. He grew and bootstrapped his own startup to a successful exit. Founder Hour episodes go behind the scenes to learn how some of the best e-commerce brands were founded, grown, and operated straight from the founders themselves. Founder Hour is brought to you by Focal Software, a new generation ERP and operation suite for e-commerce brands and third-party marketplace sellers. Focal was built with SMB brands and marketplace sellers in mind to help them grow profitably. Now let's welcome our host, Joe Pawlak.
Hello and welcome to the Focal E-commerce Insights podcast, where we chat with e-commerce entrepreneurs about business, selling online, and how to overcome challenges for success. Joining us today is Phil Irvine. Phil has a bachelor's degree from the University of Notre Dame, an MBA from UCLA Anderson. He has unique experience working about 50% in-house with companies and 50% on the agency side for brands. He started a company called ND Asset Management in 2003, which was a real estate investment company that had investments in Columbus, Ohio, and San Antonio, Texas. He's led growth across multiple popular categories, including health and wellness, beauty, consumer packaged goods, and automotive. He actively participates in marathons and triathlons, and he's an entrepreneur whose current projects include the beverage brands Moon and BARE. And Phil currently lives in Los Angeles, California. Phil, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, welcome, and thank you for having me. And glad to dive in and chat about the crazy world of e-commerce right now. So.
Yes. So let's. We always like to start with how you got into e-commerce, but first with how you got into being in business on your own or with startups or whatever your path was from maybe even the corporate world, if that was your drive to get out on your own. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, thinking through this, I had probably two inflection points in my career that pivoted me into the entrepreneurship side with business. The first was shortly after I graduated from college. For some context, I worked at Johnson & Johnson. I was part of an IT leadership program, and which was great. Johnson & Johnson, Fortune, probably 100 company, great environment, great culture. But, especially being young in my career, I had really small areas of control, of focus, of learning in the IT space at that time. And if I, backward to about 3-4 years when I was in college, I just had huge interest when I was in college. I threw parties when I was at Notre Dame and got into the concept of integrated marketing to try to attract people to parties and events and things that were going on around campus. And this first inflection point was, I was at Johnson & Johnson. It was stimulating to some extent, but I always knew that I had a vision of being a general manager and having more control over my career to some extent. And so that propelled me to start a real estate investment company with a friend of mine from Notre Dame. Long story short, it wasn't the most successful venture, but to add some color around this was around 2003 to 2006. For some of your audience members, they might remember the real estate crash, the financial crash that happened, around 2007. And so in this time, a lot of people like myself, we were taking out 100% finance loans to buy real estate and then hoping to hold on to them for short periods of time to flip them for a profit. But the problem was a lot of these loans had variable terms where after a year or two, your 0% interest spiked to 12, 15%, and you were kind of SOL in terms of flipping and turning around your investment. So it was a failed venture, but a philosophy that I always have is there's always a learning, whether you have a success or a failure. And I think, looking back, I would have still done the same thing because I got to learn about stuff like, marketing with trying to marketing your properties when you put them on the market, people management, bringing in tenants and then having to communicate with them if there was maintenance and repairs needed. And then just general operations and finance management, managing your mortgage payment, rent incomes, trying to figure out pricing for rents and stuff like that. So I think that was my first inflection point. My second was after, I'd say 2 to 3 years after I went to business school. I went to business school 5 years after working at Johnson and Johnson. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I did want to expand out of IT into more of a generalist role, whether that be marketing, overall operations, or general management. And I worked at a couple of large companies for 5 to 7 years after I graduated from business school. But I think I kept running up against the challenge where I always had an appetite to learn more about what was going on at a company and having more control over the success of companies and brands. I had some great roles in marketing, CRM, growth at certain brands, but I really saw that my sweet spot and what really got me excited about work was when I was able to pivot into smaller companies and have a larger responsibility and area of impact. So I think, I really chalk it up to those two separate inflection points that have pivoted me more towards the entrepreneurial side of a career path versus the traditional, corporate path.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I wasn't sure about your corporate background, but when you talk about J&J, that's about as big in corporate as you get. I mean, that's all over the world, and like you said, many billion. I think it's hundreds of billion-dollar company, right? J&J.
It's got to be over that now. I mean,
Yeah.
they have like 5 different healthcare divisions, or 5+ that probably do 20 to 30 billion on their own. So yeah.
Yeah. And then you mentioned wanting more control and more responsibility, and you also mentioned the real estate 2007, 8, 9, the real estate situation. And I was involved in that too after it happened, because in Denver where I live, nobody wanted to buy any downtown condos. So they were practically giving them away. But I always think of a term that I bring up, see if you remember this one. Do you remember the ninja loans?
I want to say, are those similar to the adjustable rate mortgages? But
Yeah, it was
I'm sure
part
if
of
you
that, but the acronym was no income, just ask. So they
Yep.
didn't you didn't even need a job. So yeah, that was a mess. But then you talk about wanting more control of a situation. That is a good example of something that you had no control over. Like that was a big, massive thing that was completely out of your control. So you wanted to get into business on your own to get a little bit more control of that. You did the real estate business, and then why don't you bring us a little bit more up to date about what you got going on with these beverage brands? It sounds like that's your main focus at this point.
Yeah. So I'll talk about the two beverage brands that I currently have equity. It's a unique position because I have equity and I'm also an operator. And then I'm also working on another venture called Flavor Hawk, where knock on wood, I soon will be obtaining equity, but also am an operator. But so for some background about these two beverage brands. They were started and founded by a good friend of mine, Darnell Smith. We've been friends for 20 years. He has an advertising background and also a background heavily in the alcohol and spirits category. And about 4 or 5 years ago, he saw a market need for non-alcoholic spirits that had an elevated taste profile and overall experience than what was currently on the market. Especially with a lot of younger people, there's a big trend happening where they're drinking less alcohol and they're looking for alternatives if they need to either relax, still get some type of buzz, or get a release from the day-to-day stress. And so he started Moon, which is a non-alcoholic spirit that has THC. So it has a little bit of a cannabis feel. You mix it as if you were mixing a cocktail and experience it. We like to, our tagline is it's a one-to-one replacement for alcohol. So you kind of mix it as if you would mix a normal drink, except you would mix in the Moon instead of the alcohol. And then BARE is a non-alcoholic spirit. it doesn't have the THC or cannabis, so it's a pure one-to-one replacement for alcohol. So it was very interesting to myself. I do enjoy an occasional cocktail or beer or whatnot, but the past 4 years I've participated in Dry January, which is, for a lot of people, it's kind of a reset to start every new year. You abstain from alcohol for the entire 31 days. And so I had tried, tons of different non-alcoholic beers, wines, spirits, and these two by far and away were the best tasting ones that I've tried. So the space interested me. And then the timing was just right. I was in transition from a private equity company, and I was kind of looking for my next move. And, both of these were startups, but I was kind of the first person bought in to stand up and, put in a function of running e-commerce for both of these brands. With both blended, it's about 50% of sales are e-commerce and 50% are wholesale and retail. So it's a decent portion of the business, and it's been very stimulating. You mentioned Johnson and Johnson. I worked at Beachbody, which was a $1 billion company at the time. I've worked at $100 million companies, and then I've run teams that have managed media for multi-billion-dollar companies as well too. So to me it was really fun to get in at the ground floor and kind of help build the culture, the process, the framework, the creative media strategy for these brands. And both are doing fairly well. We've hit a couple of hurdles with investment and things of that nature, but that's kind of the nature of the beast with every startup venture. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're hitting on some challenges right off the bat. So as a startup, what else have you come across, either in traditional distribution for beverages or in the e-commerce space?
Yeah, so the big challenge that every beverage brand has, especially from an e-commerce perspective, is how can you. So number one, the cost of goods sold are typically higher in the CPG space just because of the formulation of the liquid, the bottling, the packaging, and then the shipping charges. The shipping charges can be somewhat expensive depending upon how big your product is. And then if you think about it from a P&L perspective, a lot of times we talk about unit economics and trying to get to first order profitability. So if you take your cost of goods sold and then add in, your marketing spend, just to simplify it, you want to make sure you're profitable from whatever your price point is. And so the two challenges that a lot of brands have are discounting. So being strategic about your discounts so that you're not essentially giving away the product. And then how much of your marketing spend do you need to invest in to attract people to have a desire for your product as well too. I think the unique thing with these two brands that we've gone back and forth with a lot is that we're trying to claim a premium positioning in the space. So we're for the most part, we're refusing to discount unless it's for customers that have already purchased as a part of win-back campaigns or special, like really, really special sales. So we haven't really been playing with that lever. So the challenge has really been what is the media and marketing mix to be at a level where it's still economical. And it's a challenge, especially with THC. Like Meta and X are the main platforms where people advertise right now, where it's acceptable to promote cannabis. And even there, the rules are constantly changing. They're monitoring the content on your landing pages and your ads, your creative. And so
you've also got unique tax situations in different states as well. And you can't even put those products on certain marketplaces. Has that been a challenge to get it out there on from an e-commerce standpoint?
Yeah. So direct to consumer, I believe we're live in 42 states. So we're live in most states.
Okay.
From a wholesale perspective, yeah, there's weird differentiations by state in terms of the volume of THC per container that you're allowed to sell to end consumers. So that's another complexity. But yeah, to your point, Amazon, the biggest marketplace out there, you still can't sell cannabis and THC on the Amazon marketplace. So there's a couple of others we've looked at. Air goods is one, but that's solely for B2B purposes. There's a lot more B2B options that I'm seeing as opposed to B2C. So it's yeah, just adds to the challenges that we have there.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So I think then the solution there is just find alternate marketplaces that do allow it, or focus more heavily on wholesale and distribution. Has that kind of been the process? It sounds like you're about 50-50 though, so it's a good mix.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Yeah, finding the beverage distributors. And the interesting thing that we're doing is Bear and Moon are both there's a lot of overlap with the leadership between the two brands. So a lot of times with the beverage distributors, if they're maybe not as comfortable with cannabis and THC, we'll lead with Bear as a hook. And then hopefully within those discussions, we try to package the value prop of both brands to get them open to, reselling both. So that's been part of our strategy. Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't touch on the direct to consumer side, an area of opportunity that we've seen some wins, but definitely could there's future growth is influencers. So, with a lot of our competitors, they've been really smart about testing the promotion of their products with multiple influencers that represent their target demo, and then having them, talk about the brand on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, and then tapping into their audiences to expose them to the brand. So that's there's a lot of other things, but I think those are two of the bigger areas of opportunity, let's say.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that TikTok is creating a whole ecosystem for exactly that, for being able to essentially advertise or partner affiliate type things with influencers, and then they can very easily expose you or expose their followers to you,
Yeah.
even directly.
Definitely. And yeah, and just to touch on that with the other big venture that I'm working on right now, it's a company called Flavor Hawk. The consumer facing app is called Feed Me, and what it is, it's a food recommendation platform. It's the only platform that recommends food at restaurants at a menu item level. So you fill out a profile, a survey with your favorite ingredients, your dietary preferences, your flavor preferences, your allergies, and then it gives you a predictive score at restaurants of their match rate with your preferences. But I just bring that up to, on an influencer front, there's an interesting evolution that's been happening with the use of influencers. And granted, we're still in the early stages, but 10 years ago, people thought they had to partner with influencers like Paris Hilton, Kim Kardashian, take your NBA star, NFL, people with millions and millions of followers. But we actually found through testing, we've partnered with some influencers with 500,000 plus followers, but we actually found the biggest wins with ones that had less than 10,000 followers. But our hypothesis is that they had a stronger connection with our audience in the market that we were focused on.
Very targeted, very loyal.
Yeah, and the catchy phrase now is nano influencers, and how to be smart about using them, because a lot of times also they're more cost effective than macro influencers as well too. So it's just this is already kind of known with a lot of e-com and marketing leaders, but I think with Flavor Hawk in particular, I've been able to be on the front end of actually testing this and seeing the data support that hypothesis too.
Yeah, that's cool. So talking about different technologies like TikTok, different tools that you can use. What about your website platform? We work with a lot of Shopify and WooCommerce. Are you doing online sales directly through the websites?
Yeah. So Moon is on WooCommerce and Bear is on Shopify.
Okay.
Yeah, both are solid. Definitely a little bit more of a Shopify fan. Sorry, WooCommerce, but WooCommerce, this was before I came to the team, but I believe it was a little more cannabis friendly at the time when
Mhm.
we migrated or we launched our web presence there. So
WooCommerce was?
WooCommerce was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't, I should know this. I haven't investigated if Shopify has cannabis brands. No, I got to imagine they've opened it up to that. So,
Yeah,
um,
that's a good question. I'm not sure, but I do know that back in the COVID days, and it's always seems like COVID has to come up when you talk about e-commerce too. But I have heard some stories of alternate medicines getting kicked off of Shopify and moving to WooCommerce. So there was some of uh, talk or evidence that Shopify was more tightly controlled, maybe a little more ideological than
yeah.
WooCommerce, or less free, whatever you want to call it. But I have heard some of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, and Shopify, they've grown a ton over the last 3 to 4 years. So they have a lot more leverage to be able to do that because the demand is there for their platform. I mean, they've done a really good job about how they position themselves mostly with smaller to medium-sized businesses, but they've been able to come upstream with larger enterprises now that they're supporting. And I think a large part of it is the perception of the apps that integrate with Shopify to be able to do a lot of different things with your store. So
It's a big ecosystem at this point for sure.
yeah.
What other tools are you using to help? Like you said, you're more on the operation side of things. What tools are you using to help run these businesses from a regular standpoint or an e-commerce standpoint? Anything else stand out?
Yeah, so I'm big. I'm also just by the nature of the way our teams are structured, I'm really hands-on with the analytics and dashboard reporting for all of our businesses and across Moon, Bear, and Flavorhawk. There's a lot of data visualization analytics platforms out there. Domo and Tableau are two that I've used historically that are great. Looker is another one that's great, but I've actually become really fond of DataBox. It's a it's a platform to set up your integrations. You can bring in data from all of your media channels, your website platform, Google Analytics, your fulfillment. So like ShipStation integrates within there. And then all of your social channels, like your organic social activities. And then the cool thing with that is that you can centralize it fairly quickly. With Flavorhawk, I just stood that instance up in about an hour with all the data connections, and then it has a really solid user interface where you can mix and match different metrics that you want to see in a view, and then you can easily like query it to see different trends with different metrics that you're trying to track. And then you can visualize it in the bar charts, lines, pie charts. Like they have like 10 different visualization types. So it's a big one that I'm a fan of, that I really just started using it 2 years ago, but I'm a big fan. So
Okay, so the problem you're solving there is just having easy visibility into operations, essentially, how the business is running on various marketplaces, platforms,
yeah.
um, in one place.
Yeah, and to give you a little more color with that, for all the businesses that I work with, we have kind of a standard executive dashboard where you can see sales, website visits, conversion rate, media spend, sales by product, um, customer acquisition costs, average order value. Like that's the majority of it. But then the cool thing about the platform is you can set up daily, weekly, monthly recaps so that it can give you snapshots, sent to your email or sent to Slack or messaging platforms. I think as an executive, it's good to have these dashboards that you can log into and see, but having that regular that regular update about how the business is progressing to quickly understand if you maybe need to course correct something or need to explore further into a campaign you're running or something like that. It's I just like, I'm sure other platforms have similar capabilities, but I just like that with DataBox. It's really easy to stand that up. So.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, when speaking specifically on e-commerce, we're talking about a six trillion dollar industry right now, growing to 8 trillion. So what do you see? You mentioned nano influencers as a trend for the future. What else do you see coming in the e-commerce space that's going to be something we should keep an eye on?
Yeah, definitely an increase in marketplace transactions is going to be huge. I think more and more, I actually did a podcast about this myself, like the trends or just the pure volume of transactions across Amazon, eBay, Walmart, continue to rise on a yearly basis. So I think having a presence on there, getting smarter about your advertising there is going to be huge. And then social selling. So social selling is already starting to take off. The ability to buy directly within Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok for the most part. I do think it's going to be interesting what happens if TikTok happens to change ownership, where that traffic and that audience is going to migrate to, because I think it's definitely going to migrate somewhere. The Flavor Hawk company, it's funny, one of our talking points is we tried to lean into the uncertainty of TikTok, and that our app Feed Me could be a destination for food content for people in the future if TikTok happens to get banned or with the changeover of ownership. So that's been interesting. I do also think, just to call out two other categories, I think like gaming, gaming is exploding right now in terms of advertising dollars being spent there. But I think this is definitely not my domain, but there's a lot of transaction volume that's happening within gaming platforms and formats. And I think with the explosion of the metaverse and augmented reality, virtual reality, I see that exploding more and overlapping with e-commerce, purchase as well too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize what a massive industry gaming is, and that there's a lot more happening within those game systems and the games themselves, where there's commerce within these games. They're not just playing games.
Yeah.
Literally, they're not just playing games.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. You didn't mention AI, but of course that dovetails in with the augmented reality and the other things. That's obviously coming very quickly.
Yeah. So yeah, to touch on AI, to pivot back to Flavor Hawk and Feed Me, it's really an interesting culture. I can't take the credit for it because this came from the CEO and the co-founders, but in terms of our workflow and work processes, we're 100% embracing AI. So a popular trendy topic right now are AI agents, and conceptually, it's bringing in virtual assistants that can start to complete tasks like regular tactical tasks for you without you having to invest in time to do the research or read summaries from meeting notes. And so it's interesting because this is new to me, and I'm still adjusting to this ways of working because I'm a little bit more old school with documenting and everything. But we're trying to centralize all of our project management, all of our reporting results. We're using Fireflies to capture meeting notes and summaries, and we're centralizing all of it into a central project management platform. And then the vision is that we can have AI agents that sit on top of that, and that you can kind of start to talk to these agents to get insights or ideas or summaries of past work that's been done. I think it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be interesting from a couple of perspectives. Like I do think our workflows and our level of effort is going to decrease with certain rudimentary tasks. I think a larger philosophical question that I have is how this is going to impact team structures going forward. Because I still believe there's a place for humans and resources to some capacity, but I'm really interested to see where we're going to go with hiring, especially lower level positions at like the analyst or even associate manager levels. So anyways, that's my some rough thoughts with that. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it's hard to avoid those observations because really they're that technology is going to replace a lot of positions, just plain and simple, right? But we don't know what other benefits it will bring to human life in general, I guess you could call it that, but it is moving quickly and changing very quickly.
Yeah. I just to call out one tool that I'm starting to use pretty regularly. I mean, most people are familiar with ChatGPT. There's one called Claude that I've just started using like a month or 2 months ago, and I like how you can feed it documents, files, and it starts to get to know your brand and your brand tone more.
You can give it X-rays and it will act as a doctor and evaluate your X-rays.
So I'm learning new use cases every day with that, but it's pretty powerful how intelligent and on brand that it can look. I still think a human needs to step in with certain types of messaging and creative direction, but it reduces a lot of the legwork that a lot of marketers and operators had to put in for a lot of tasks in the past. So
yeah, no question. Okay, well, let's circle back a little bit on the whole conversation, high level, as far as anybody that's watching this, that's thinking of getting into business, being an entrepreneur, and then e-commerce, so two separate parts. What advice do you have for people that are looking at maybe jumping from the corporate world to the entrepreneur space, business owner, and then the same thing for e-commerce?
Yeah, I think first to touch on people that are looking to pursue a career in entrepreneurship, I think really try to, I don't want to say do a formal assessment, but think about your personality type. Because a lot of people that, at least in my network, you like structure, you like having roadmaps, you like, knowing where you're going to be in the next week, month, or quarter. If you take on something in an entrepreneurial capacity, you got to throw all that out the window because you never know if regulations are going to change. If you think your idea has product market fit with your audience, but then it doesn't, and you may have to course correct and change. I think, there's no hard and fast timeline, but I think the first 2 years, you got to just have that mindset to be into that. I think the other thing, a lot of people will talk about like passion and, willing to work a lot of hours. Scott Galloway actually had a recent quote recently. He's like, only successful people tell young people to go after your passion. It's smarter to go after your talent. And I agree. I think even if you're passionate about, I don't know, nutrition, supplements, if you don't know where to begin to launch a supplement company, you shouldn't pursue that. Like align yourself with an idea that you have some background, some experience, some knowledge of, and pursue that. But the other thing that I would say is because I've observed this firsthand with a lot of CEOs and founders I've worked with. Be open to talking with leaders, advisors, and experts to get ideas, but also have a balance of, not, taking in information, but then turning it into actionable next steps. Because I think a lot of times some founders feel like they always feel like there's always some new shiny toy that they should be going after with their product or service. But at a certain point, you got to hone in and get a focus, because it's gonna drive your team crazy if you're chasing after multiple ideas, multiple potential efficiencies, and it is a tough balance because you do want to be flexible, but at the same time, you do want to have a focus to achieve success. And that's going to ultimately look better perception wise to investors, because investors don't want you going into meetings saying you're going to be everything to everybody. You got to have a focus at some point. So
yeah, you've got to definitely narrow it down. So you hit on a number of things there. Passion if you have talent, or maybe it's passion for your talent that you have. Build a team, and then get it focused. Stay focused.
Yeah, I think and then you also asked about e-commerce. Yeah, the same principles are true with e-commerce, but I think the big element is understand what it means to be digitally savvy. With an e-commerce business, you have a lot more data, your website, your marketing communications, like you know a little bit more about your audience. So I think it's understanding how all that connects, or bringing in talent that understands how all that connects, and then using that to make strategic decisions to grow your business. That's just the other piece that I would touch on there. So
Yeah, perfect. Also good advice. Okay, well, as we're winding down here, why don't you tell our listeners how they can find out more about Moon and Bear, and potentially find you if they're looking for some advice or to reach out?
yeah, definitely. So you could find me on LinkedIn. I believe I'm the only Phil Irvine, but if you put in Phil Irvine, Sherman Oaks, California, I'm pretty sure. My email also is phil@mojopsg.com. Yeah, Moon and Bear. You can find Moon at enjoymxxn.com. Bear you can find at enjoybare.com. And a Flavor Hawk you can find at flavorhawk.com. So,
All right. Very nice. Well, with that, I'd like to say thank you, Phil, for participating today and sharing all your insights and experience. And thank you to all our listeners. And we'll wrap up and see you next time.
yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Focal Insights Podcast. If you like this episode, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you can be alerted of new episodes. See you next time.